From refugees from Myanmar settling in Tulsa to one of the largest equality centers in the United States, the city of Tulsa is working hard to become a diverse and inclusive community for all residents. Ashley Harris Philippsen is Deputy Chief of Community Development and Policy at the City of Tulsa. She says diversity, equity, and inclusion is paramount to a well-rounded community.
In terms of developing communities here in Tulsa, inclusion is essential. I'm a huge fan of user-centered design. What does that mean? If we're designing a community, a neighborhood, whether it's mixed use or residential or otherwise, it's important to include folks most connected to the development. So just north of here in historic Greenwood and in an area formerly platted as Kirkpatrick Heights Edition, we are doing a development project of over 55 acres. And unlike a lot of our projects where we have gotten community input and made sure to get people's ideas, we are going to walk hand in hand with residents, business owners, folks with development acumen and other insights to think through how we have the most inclusive master planning process and an anti-displacement lens to ensure folks get to learn, live, and grow as this development comes underway.
She says that with COVID-19 surging through Tulsa and the state of Oklahoma, businesses, municipalities, and organizations are working to support families during virtual learning.
With schools going virtual and people still having to report to work, the question of how do businesses help support parents or caregivers in their workforce. So with Impact Tulsa, with Tulsa Public Schools and other entities, we brainstormed how are we going to support employees? So we've worked to promote people being flexible, whether it's switching hours, switching shifts, whether it is allowing for parents to bring their students to school or doing co-ops where businesses stand up child care centers or allow for parents to work from home. Flexibility has been required, and communication and collaboration has also been a byproduct of needing to adjust to what I'm calling this temporary new normal, because I do not want this to be our new normal.
Philippsen notes that there's a 10-year gap in life expectancy between North and South Tulsa. People living in North Tulsa do not live as long as those in South Tulsa, according to studies. She says the city of Tulsa seeks to improve quality of life for residents in the city.
How do we cut through the noise at the city? One is clarity of vision and purpose. So a few people may know that our mission at the City of Tulsa is to increase the life expectancy. As you may know, North Tulsans die about 10 years sooner than folks in Midtown and South Tulsa zip codes. There's also this idea that we need to increase our population. We are losing graduates to other cities and other opportunities. And also just want to create more choice-filled futures. So increasing post-secondary attainment and increasing the quality of life for Tulsans. So if that is our North Star, that helps cut through any of the noise and is a continual imperative to align with mutual interests. Whether you, wherever you fall on the political spectrum, it's undeniable that people need increased quality of life, that we need to improve on social determinants of health. So for me, cutting through the noise is like maximizing the time that we have to make an influence because it's about every single Tulsan in this city.
The New Tulsans initiative seeks to help newcomers to the city. It was started a few years ago as the immigrant and refugee population grew within Tulsa.
One more initiative that's not in my portfolio, but it's something I'm proud of, is the New Tulsans initiative. So newcomers to Tulsa, and when I say newcomers, I mean immigrants, people who are applying for citizenship, get their citizenship, are equipped with knowledge, skills, and resources to thrive here. So whether it's how to find a job or where to find housing, it's a great opportunity to embrace our newest Tulsans and ensure they're set up for success.
Many may not know it, but Tulsa is home to one of the largest LGBTQ+ equality centers in the United States. The Dennis R. Neal Equality Center attracts LGBTQ+ youth, teens, adults, and allies from around the region. Toby Jenkins is executive director of the operation.
The Dennis R. Neal Equality Center is the headquarters of Oklahomans for Equality. It's our LGBTQ community center. It's similar to the other 300 that are around the world, but it's one of the oldest and one of the largest, and certainly the largest in this section of the country. And we served in 2019 about 78,000 people who access services here at the Dennis R. Neal Equality Center, which means we serve more people than San Diego, Philadelphia, and the Chicago Center and individuals who access services here. We serve a large heartland region, so we have individuals sometimes who drive almost 4 hours to participate in our programs because we're pretty much it. We don't receive any public funding. All of ours are through private donations and through grants and foundations and corporations and faith communities who support our work. We have programs that are from the cradle to the grave. So we have baby showers and we have support groups for people who are trying to have babies, and then we do funerals. We did a funeral here this week here at the Equality Center. So when I say we serve you across the lifespan, that's true. And so our mission is to serve lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus, and all the different identities that you will find underneath sexual and gender minorities. So our program is as diverse as our community is. So we have medical facility that has about 127 patients they see a week. We have a counseling department that sees individuals who come here who are needing support and counseling. And in addition to that, we have a chaplaincy program. We have lots of social programming geared towards different ages and different challenges and different sections of our community.
Jenkins is straightforward when asked about the challenges that the LGBTQ plus community faces in Tulsa and surrounding areas.
Well, first of all, it's Oklahoma. They never have been extremely excited about the presence of LGBTQ people. We came here on the Trail of Tears and probably have been here in Indian Territory for about 160, 70 years. But our presence has always been ignored and has always been resented. Some of the greatest and most prominent people in Oklahoma who've left their mark on the American history were LGBTQ people who came from Oklahoma. So the challenges that we have faced is this organization was founded in the middle of the late 70s, towards the late 70s, and it was founded in response to what was considered the greatest threat was police brutality and being discriminated against in the workplace. Marriage wasn't even on our radar, and serving in the military was not even something we even thought would ever happen. But that was why this organization was founded. And so the founders of this organization, many of them who are still actively involved today, have continued to build programming and services to take care of their community because the state of Oklahoma wouldn't, hasn't, and doesn't plan on doing it in the near future. So literally the programs that we provide, they would be non-existent in this part of the country if we did not provide them. And so what we've had to do is go against the flow. We've had to represent and care for our community. And an example of that was when the AIDS crisis started. It was our community, LGBTQ individuals, who responded to the need of taking care of their siblings who were dying of the AIDS epidemic. And out of that, several organizations were created and spun off from this organization, such as Tulsa Cares and Hope Testing. So that's an example of when we couldn't count on Oklahoma to look after us, we had to look after ourselves. And we pretty much have to do that today. Many times Oklahoma legislators are introducing bills that are directly targeting lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer individuals, either targeting our kids in schools or targeting our older adults or attacking our relationships or trying to strip rights of us. And we usually lead the country in the most anti-LGBTQ bills introduced from coast to coast, border to border. And so this organization has had to be on the front lines fighting those issues while we have legislators trying to attack us with bills and laws that would discriminate against us. We at the same time have to take care of our own community. So we're fighting two fronts. We're caring for our folks, and we're fighting legislators who seem to think that we're an easy target to attack.
But he adds that in recent years, community members have been able to come together and heal the past pain that comes from being excluded from the community.
We've learned that in the middle of the pain and the crisis and the trauma, that people need to be able to think about something else. And so we've learned the value of creating social programming to help individuals to be able to just to be themselves, be in a place where they're safe and their identity is recognized, and just be able to relax and celebrate who they are. And so we do a lot of social programming, just celebrating individuals, because we feel like that's the healing part to help them address the trauma and the rejection and the discrimination they've experienced. So this can be a pretty happy place. I mean, that's why they call it gay, but it can be a pretty happy place. But it's a happy place in the middle of, if you can just imagine, a refugee camp, where people are surviving, they're victims of war, and yet in this refugee camp, we've built a safe harbor for individuals to be able to just think of some other things to, get their mind off their pain and their isolation and their abandonment by their family and their faith community. And so we've learned to mix it all together because we believe it takes both. We believe all of it folds in together to serve the people of Oklahoma.
Born and raised in Oklahoma, Jenkins has love for the city he calls home.
I personally love Tulsa because there was a time in my life when there were people in Tulsa who turned their back on me. A church that put me out, an elected official who I worked for who fired me because I came out as gay, legislators right from this city who introduced bills saying that gay people could not have custody of their children. That's what it was like when I came out 25 years ago. But there were other Tulsans who said that's not all right. It's not all right that a man should not be able to have custody of his children. And they fought and opposed that bill. There were other elected officials who said, it's not all right that elected official down the hallway fired you. I'm going to hire you. And I had the joy of working in the court system for 18 years for those elected officials. There were other churches that said it's not all right that you've been told that God doesn't love you. And so I go to that church every Sunday, except it's on TV right now because of COVID, Boston Avenue United Methodist. So I was kicked out of one cradle and landed in another cradle that said it's all not right. So I guess for me, the reason I love Tulsa is at my greatest time of loss and abandonment, there were people here all along who said, that's not all right. It's not all right. And they said, it's not all right that we did this to you. And they're not the ones that did it, but they took responsibility. And I think Tulsa is trying to say, we've hurt people over and over again. It's not necessarily us that did it today, but we're going to take responsibility because it was our ancestors, it was our loved ones, it was people that we knew, that we all may even be people in our family, and it's not all right. And so I think that's what I love about Tulsa, is we're trying to acknowledge the damage we've done and admit it wasn't all right, and people are stepping forward saying, we're going to write a new history for this city. And I hope to be included in that history of where, a city that was so oppressive to LGBTQ persons finally becomes a city that's known for its inclusivity and its welcoming atmosphere and culture.
About a half-mile from the Equality Center is the Tulsa Regional Chamber of Commerce. Kuma Roberts is Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the Chamber. Nearly 100 years after the Tulsa Race Massacre, the Tulsa Regional Chamber is working to positively affect the community.
100 years ago, our chamber was around during the Race Massacre. And there were some issues that might have occurred during that time that the chamber had an indirect role in. They certainly weren't out in the community, looting and burning the community down, but certainly didn't help build up the business community. And even 100 years later, we still have a huge deficit and disparity in terms of business leadership in the African American community. So one of the things we did was we released our minutes from 1921 publicly. That was really important, that we shared our story the way we told it 100 years ago to the community. And it wasn't true. It didn't align with what we know to be true for our community. So that was number one. Number two is we've really gone all in on the conversation around equity. What does equity mean versus equality? How do we get there? And how do we address and make sure that our practices within our organization are more equitable? So internally, we've done some blind hiring and taken the names and education off so that we're not using our implicit bias when we're hiring individuals. We've changed some of our policy and practice to address equity in terms of our legislative processes, as well as our attraction and retention practices for businesses that are looking to come to the region. So those are just a couple of the things that we've done to really bear down and weigh in heavily on what we find important, which is D&I.
Roberts works to educate the community on what diversity, equity, and inclusion means and to correct misconceptions.
I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding, and what does it all mean when we say equity, right? Some people think it means a handout. Some people think it means that you're giving someone something that they haven't earned. And I think so that education and awareness, trying to make sure people understand what equity truly means, has been kind of the first challenge that we had to overcome. The next challenge has been, the Chamber's made up of mostly small businesses. About 75% of our membership are small businesses, of employees of 50 people or less. So how do they make a contribution to the conversation around D&I? When you're wearing the hat, you're the HR, you're the hiring, you're the working the front desk, the cashier. So it's been really interesting to think about what makes it more impactful for our small businesses and how can they contribute to the story of D&I for the community and not just feel like it's not for them because they can't contribute fully. So that's been the other challenge we've had.
She says Tulsa feels like a little big town, which she enjoys.
I was born and raised in Tulsa. I've been here my entire life. And Tulsa for me feels like the little big town. It just feels like you have, it's small enough that you can make an impact. And it feels big enough that you can be connected to anyone across the world, quite honestly. There's just someone, I know enough people that can get me access to just whatever audience I need. And there's something about Tulsa that is unique in that it feels small, but yet it's so big. And I've really enjoyed living here and serving here in my community for as long as I've been here. So it's been great.
I want to thank our guests, Ashley Harris Philippsen, Toby Jenkins, and Kuma Roberts, for speaking with me in Tulsa Talks.